Christians are often told that teaching their version of the creation story wouldn't be fair and inclusive to everyone else.
So why do atheists get to tell their version of the creation story exclusively in schools around the world? Today on Creation Magazine Live.
Welcome to Creation Magazine Live. My name's Calvin Smith.
And I'm Richard Fangrad.
And today we're going to be talking about the atheist creation story.
Yes.
Yeah. Now there are literally hundreds of creation stories from all over the world, different people groups and things like that. But many times evolutionists will criticize Christians and creationists saying, well, why should you teach biblical creation? Why wouldn't you teach other creation stories? You know, how do you know yours is right?
Right. And what they don't admit, of course, is that evolution is just such another creation story.
Right.
And it's an atheistic creation story that's highly religious as well, and it's taught as fact in classrooms all around the world.
Right, and it's not like there's not variations of their creation story either, right? You've got, Lamarckian evolution, you've got Darwinian evolution, neo-Darwinian evolution, punctuated equilibrium, chaos theory. There's all sorts of variations of their creation story as well.
Now, people around the world will generally... Everybody believes a creation story, and we can broadly categorize these creation stories in kind of two areas. There's the atheistic, naturalistic, evolutionary type of story. That's, of course, very popular in many Western nations. And then there's creation by some intelligent designer.
Right.
There'd be many religions that would teach that. Of course, Christianity teaches that as well. People try to mix the two of them together, and we have that in Christianity. You have theistic evolution and things like that. We'll talk about that later. But there's those two general categories to begin with.
So whether you're examining, the North or South American Indian creation myths, what people call Indian creation myths, or the Australian Aborigine Biami legends, or China's creation stories, or New Zealand's, Maori people, or the biblical account, accounts of creation, are with all over the world with different people groups. So creation by a supernatural creator, that seems to be a natural way for people to, look at the world around them.
Right, and there's many common elements that these stories will have, of course.
Right.
And there's stuff on the website where you can read about that, creation.com. They typically speak of some type of an original paradise, and then a fall from grace, that kind of thing, and some type of global judgment, a worldwide flood, or something like flood legends are actually quite popular around the world. And the obvious design in nature could lead various people groups to believe in a generic creator.
Right.
And however, such similar accounts are hard to explain just by chance. It's obvious that they would go back to a shared common belief originally, and we can look at the origins of such stories. Right.
Now, children naturally seem to perceive the world as being created. Richard Dawkins and several atheists have said, no, it's just that they get indoctrinated to believe in a creator. But actually, they've done studies, and that's not true.
That's the way the kids start.
That's right. Yeah. They start off believing in creation, but it's rather through an intense indoctrination in a school system where they don't allow anything but evolutionary ideas to be taught, and then that's equated with science, of course. That's when people usually accept that type of creation story.
Right. Atheists have to have a way of explaining how we got here without some intelligent creator, because then they wouldn't be atheists. They'd be theists of some sort.
Yeah.
So all atheists are evolutionists by default. That's the default position. You have to believe in some form of naturalism instead of supernaturalism, and then they've couched it in this scientific terminology, and they call it a scientific theory.
Right. Now, the majority of people on Earth today fall into the first group we mentioned, creationists, right? But sometimes we've got theistic evolutionists, right? People that believe, well, they've maybe gone to a public school system, so now they've accepted a bit of evolution. They still want to believe in a creator.
So they're mixing them,
Right?
Yeah.
And so, they'll try to mix those two together. But oftentimes what happens, no matter what background they're from, if they start to do that, they start to become consistent thinkers and think, well, if I've got a way of explaining how I came here naturalistically, then they give up on the creation story.
Right.
And so it's often, we've pointed this out, right? It's a slippery slope. If you're a creationist, you believe in God used evolution to create, then after a while you just become more of a naturalistic thinker and you give up on that kind of concept.
Right, and theistic evolutionists might believe that they've reached a pleasant compromise between two major opposing views like this. But as William Jennings Bryan once said, he said this: theistic evolution may be defined as an anesthetic which deadens the patient's pain while atheism removes his religion. William Jennings Bryan, of course, the famous defender of creation at the Scopes trial in 1925 in Tennessee there. So
That's
interesting quote there from him.
I mean, theistic evolution seems to be a idea that's on the rise, but it sure isn't helping the cause. So stay tuned, we'll have some more for you.
Most people are under the impression that coal forms slowly in swamps over millions of years, but this view neglects the testimony of tree trunk fossils that cut across many coal layers, known as polystrate fossils. If these tree trunks were buried gradually over thousands of years, the top parts of the trees would have rotted away before they could be protected by sediment. Derek Ager, Professor of Geology at University College of Swansea, recognised this when he wrote of trees buried in coal seams. If one estimates the total thickness of the British coal measures as about 1,000 metres laid down in about 10 million years, then, assuming a constant rate of sedimentation, it would have taken 100,000 years to bury a tree 10 metres high, which is ridiculous. He then went on to say, we cannot escape the conclusion that sedimentation was at times very rapid indeed, so the slow swamp story should itself be laid to rest.
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
Welcome back. Today on Creation Magazine Live, we're talking about the atheist creation story, or the atheist creation myth.
That's right.
I like to call it.
Creation stories from around the world often attempt to explain what sociologist and professor emeritus at Harvard University, Daniel Bell, said. He said that culture is the effort to provide a coherent set of answers to the existential predicaments that confront all human beings. So if you're seeking coherent answers about life, obviously the question of origins, that's going to be a huge question, right?
Sure, yeah.
And so, I mean, the origin of something really determines its meaning and its value, right? If I was looting around in my attic and I find an old painting and I say, maybe it's not my cup of tea, but then I found out that, oh no, it was created by a brilliant artist and it's worth, $5 million. Well, all of a sudden the origin of that painting would let me know that, well, maybe I don't want to just throw it out in the trash.
It changes how you think about it. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway, the painting's origin would be the reason why I changed my opinion, right?
Right. Similarly, if you believe mankind was created by, for example, a warlike being, something like that, that overpowers his opponents and so on, then adherence to that system probably won't have a problem subjugating other people groups,
right?
And because that's what they believe about origins,
right?
If you believe that there is a loving God who cares about His creation, you're going to react differently if you're serving that God, if you want to follow that God. What we believe about origins determines the rules and laws that we're going to put in place in society.
Exactly. Now, many Christians and even conservative, minded non-Christians in the Western world countries have kind of expressed some shock, with some of the court rulings we'll see. And we'll say, how could we get such an unfair decision? Or they just, this doesn't make sense to them, right? And they're wondering, well, why is this happening?
But and we talk about common sense, right? Everything, well, that goes against common sense. But common sense is only common when it's held by the commonality, is when it's held by the majority of people that's out there.
Right.
And the Judeo-Christian foundations of many Western nations have been seriously eroded from generations ago, and there's now other notions of origins coming in with naturalism and so on that lead to a different, what we call a different common sense.
Right.
And it leads to these things we see in the courtrooms.
Right. A recent online article from the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in the United States by evolutionist A.R. Cashmore argued that the justice system is flawed because it assumes people have free will. Something he argues doesn't exist if we're all the result of, random chance chemical processes.
Yeah, it's just chemistry that determines the outcome.
He said this: in Anglo-American law, for a person to be found guilty of a crime, he must be aware of his wrongdoing at the time of the crime. He must display mens rea, that is, the mind must be guilty. In certain circumstances, a defendant can be found not guilty by reasons of insanity. And then he gives an example of when such a defense wasn't successful. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer, who was found guilty for the death of 17 young men from 1978 to 1991. Of course, Dahmer was a necrophiliac, performing gross sexual acts on the dead bodies, as well as performing frontal lobotomies and boiling their skulls in acid. Pretty nasty stuff.
Yeah, nasty stuff. He said this: the rationale for the guilty verdict was that it was claimed that he knew what he was doing was wrong, as evidenced by the fact that he lied to the police about his activities. I raise this case to illustrate 2 points. First, the legal system assumes a capacity for individuals not only to distinguish between right and wrong, but to act according to those distinctions. That is, an integral component of the legal system is a belief in free will. Furthermore, the legal system assumes that it is possible to distinguish those individuals who have this capacity of free will from those who lack it.
So
that is amazing.
Yeah, he's arguing here that, you know, the only way you can be guilty of something is you have free will. But here's what he says about free will. The reality is, not only do we have no more free will than a fly or a bacterium, in actuality, we have no more free will than a bowl of sugar. And this is stunning.
And we were talking about common sense there.
Right. Well, obviously, I mean, he's a well-educated person. What are we talking about when we're talking about common sense? So this creation story of evolution leads to some very strange conclusions, and we're going to look into more about what these implications means when we come back.
What are the theological consequences of adding millions of years to Genesis? How does it impact doctrines such as the gospel, sin, the atonement? Refuting compromise is the most powerful biblical and scientific defense of a straightforward view of Genesis. Loaded with scientific support for a recent creation in 6 real days, it demolishes all attempts to twist the biblical text in order to insert millions of years, bringing clarity into an area usually mired in confusion. Must reading for Bible college students and anyone involved in church leadership or teaching. Get your copy at creation.com.
Well, this week we're talking about the atheist creation story. Now, we just finished a quote from A.R. Cashmore where he said, "We have no more free will than a bowl of sugar." Okay, well, if you're going to accept that nonsense, because that's what it is, you know, what are his and other like-minded people's conclusions then, right? Well, as noted by Lady Barbara Wooten, she's a British criminologist, she said this: if mental health and ill health cannot be defined in objective scientific terms that are free of subjective moral judgments, it follows that we have no reliable criterion by which to distinguish the sick from the healthy mind. The road is then wide open to dispense with the concept of responsibility altogether.
Amazing.
Stunning.
Yeah. And in this atheistic evolutionary worldview, Jeffrey Dahmer, was not responsible for his actions. He simply reacted that way because that's his chemical makeup, and
he evolved that way.
He evolved that way. It wasn't right or wrong or good or evil. It was just that's chemistry.
Yep.
And what did Dahmer believe about origins?
Yeah.
Quite interesting. He said this: if a person doesn't think there's a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges? That's how I thought anyway. I always believed the story of evolution as truth, that we all just came from the slime. When we died, you know, that was it. There's nothing.
So despite Cashmore's claims that free will is a myth, Dahmer stated he actually thought through his actions logically, decided a course of actions based on his belief in origins, and so apparently thoughts do have consequences.
I guess, yeah.
Right. Now, Cashmore admits that Darwin was aware of the implications of his own theory. You know, some people say, well, Darwin, you know, he was a nice guy and he didn't really think it would go where it went. Well, actually, here's what Charles Darwin said on this concept of free will. This view should teach one profound humility. One deserves no credit for anything, nor ought one to blame others. Interesting.
Yeah.
No free will, you're just acting like a robot.
No free will. A famous professor at Cornell William Provine, he said this about free will. Let me summarize my views on what modern evolutionary biology tells us loud and clear. There are no gods, no purposes, no goal-directed forces of any kind. There's no life after death. When I die, I'm absolutely certain that I'm going to be dead. That's the end for me. There's no ultimate foundation for ethics and no ultimate meaning to life. And no free will for humans either. Well, he doesn't mince words there, does he?
See, all of these evolutionists we've just mentioned here, they've thought through their system rationally, they've come to logical conclusions. What are the implications of their creation story? Our actions are the result of a stimulus response program that we just evolved that way. You can call it chemical predestination.
Yeah, okay.
Right? You're predestined to just act. Right now, I'm speaking these words not because I have any free will. It's just the chemistry in me and the stimulus response, the things that I've interacted with. That's why I'm speaking these words right now. That's, so, and these concepts have deep roots way back to Darwin himself, right?
Yeah.
And this worldview, of course, isn't just based on facts and things like that. We're going to look into the motivations behind these kinds of concepts. But if you think about this, why are atheists always railing against Christians or creationists or anything?
It doesn't make any sense.
How can they say, well, you're wrong? Well, how could I say to you, Richard, that your opinion's wrong? Well, how can it be wrong?
If you're an evolutionist, if you're an atheist, you don't have a basis for morality, as these folks that we've just quoted from have
They're
said.
admitting it.
It's just chemistry. There's no right, there's no wrong. You're just reacting to the chemistry going on in your head that causes you what to.
Right.
How can you say anyone is wrong or right? How can you say I'm right if you're an evolutionist?
How can they even say that they reasoned to a position
exactly
to say it?
Yeah.
Because it's just the chemicals in their head bouncing around, leading them to that conclusion. So actually, with no free will, there's no basis for logic, there's no basis for morality.
Everything falls apart.
Absolutely, everything falls apart. And like I said, we're going to look into this a little bit more, because you might want to say that, but nobody actually lives their life like that.
No.
Right?
You can't.
I mean, if somebody murdered your mom, you're not going to just go, oh, well, that was just the way his chemicals
just
went
chemistry.
up. You're going to want justice. And so we're going to look into those motives when we get back.
Unless you've been living underground for the last few years, I'm sure you've heard of feathered dinosaurs. It seems we're constantly hearing that birds evolved from dinosaurs. Some have even suggested that KFC could change its name to KFD, Kentucky Fried Dinosaur. But not all evolutionary scientists accept the dino-to-bird dogma. A prominent one is renowned ornithologist Alan Fiducia of the University of North Carolina. He recently stated, the theory that birds are the equivalent of living dinosaurs and that dinosaurs were feathered is so full of holes that the creationists have jumped all over it. He further laments, with the advent of feathered dinosaurs, we are truly witnessing the beginnings of the meltdown of the field of paleontology. Those looking for evidence that birds evolved from dinosaurs will be disappointed, because the Creator has told us that He created birds before the land creatures, such as dinosaurs.
To find out more from Creation Ministries International, visit our website, creation.com.
Well, we've been talking about the atheist creation story, and we've been showing that evolutionists have claimed that we have no free will, and that actually we're not responsible for our own actions. We should even change the law system that everything is based on here in the Western world. Now, is this really true, or is there a motive behind this? That's what we need to question.
Well, the motive, you don't have to search too far before you find a motive. Atheist and humanist Aldous Huxley commented, he said this, I have motive for not wanting the world to have meaning. Consequently, assumed that it had none, and was able without any difficulty to find satisfying reasons for this assumption. The philosopher who finds no meaning in the world is not concerned exclusively with the problem in pure metaphysics. He is also concerned to prove that there is no valid reason why he personally should not do as he wants to do.
Right, so when this atheist Huxley wrote this, he clearly understood that the only reason for true meaning in life was to believe in a creator God that has moral absolutes and actual laws. But the reason he didn't want that to be true was then there'd be rules regarding right and wrong, and so then he willfully chose not to believe, which is interesting because if you read the book of Romans, you're going to find God talking about that.
Yes, yes.
But then, how would he have chosen something based on such a motivation if he didn't have free will?
It all comes back to bite him, right?
Right.
It just doesn't work logically.
I mean, you remember A.R. Cashmore from the previous segment. He said, a belief in free will is akin to a religious belief. Indeed, I would argue that free will makes logical sense as long as one has the luxury of the causal magic of religion. Neither religious beliefs nor a belief in free will comply with the laws of a physical world. So here we see, so according to his own beliefs, Cashmore and his atheistic friends here, they've got no choice but to be atheists. Every decision that he thinks he's making, it's supposed to be rational and logical, his worldview. It's nothing but biochemical predestination.
Yeah,
But they go back and say, but I want it to be like that because I don't want there to be any rules, so I want to live the life I want to.
Yeah,
so
yeah. And
it's falling
they get
apart
all wrapped up in these knots here.
Yeah.
But, picking up the baton, modern champion of atheism, Richard Dawkins, said that he thinks we live in a universe that looks as though it has, this is a quote, no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. So he agrees with his predecessor, Huxley,
right,
regarding meaning of the world, apparently.
Right, and popular atheist P.Z. Myers calls himself a godless liberal. He's very proud of it. He says this. He says, first, there is no moral law. The universe is a nasty, heartless place where most things wouldn't mind killing you if you let them. No one's compelled to be nice. You or anyone could go on a murder spree, and all that's stopping you is your self-interest. There's nothing out there that imposes morality on you, other than local, temporary conditions, a lot of social enculturation, and probably a bit of genetic hardwiring that you've inherited from ancestors who lived under similar conditions.
Now, all of these people have they share the same creation story. Godless atheism, materialism. It's a naturalistic way, without any intelligent designer, of getting us here, getting the universe into the state we see it today. And we've discussed the morality, or lack of it, or lack of anything, actually.
Lack of logic, lack of reason, intelligence.
And anything else that comes from that. Is it any wonder that we're having a problem with law and with a godless society going downhill, crime and so on, that kind of thing, and people unable to make decisions in courtrooms anymore that are logical and reasonable? Right. And it's taught in the school system. It's taught their creation story, which it's a creation myth.
Yeah.
The atheist creation myth is taught exclusively in the school system to children.
Right. And it doesn't take a lot of research to just look at what's happened to morality and in schools, they'd have all these comparisons. What was considered a bad thing to be doing, in school in the 60s? Oh, chewing gum.
Chewing gum.
What's it today?
Talking in class.
Carrying a gun to school, So there's a lot of articles on our website and things like that talk about the results of evolutionism. Anyway, I'd really like to recommend, if you want to research this even further, is this DVD by Jonathan Sarfati called Evolution and at the Holocaust. And what it does is gets into the details of how Darwinian evolution influenced the Nazi Holocaust. And we'll be back.
Everyone likes to get things for free. Thanks to donors at Creation Ministries International, we have put great effort into making huge amounts of faith-building information freely available online. Creation.com now has more than 8,000 articles. Some of CMI's most popular books are in PDF format to read online for free. All 48 episodes of Creation Magazine Live and other teaching videos are online at no charge. Consider making a donation, enabling us to continue producing free faith-building information.
Welcome back. We're in the news segment here today on Creation Magazine Live.
What's going on in the news?
Well, a very interesting news report from Ball State University, and talking about academic freedom. It says, university gag order, university shuts down science class discussions. Of course,
or not academic freedom, as the case may be.
Exactly, and of course the gag order is on only one topic. And we'll look into that. So let me just read some of the article here. Officials at Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, have decided to censor what their science teachers and instructors say, ordering them not to discuss the evidence of intelligent design during science classes, according to a report from the Discovery Institute, which monitors such battles. Interesting. In a blatant attack on academic freedom and the unfettered consideration of scientific viewpoints, the president of Ball State University in Muncie has imposed a gag order on science faculty forbidding their discussion of the theory of intelligent design in science classrooms, the organization announced this week. Isn't that stunning?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we hear all the time, well, we need to be open-minded, right? We want to be free thinkers. Yeah, science is about just going and discovering whatever's there. What a bunch of baloney. I mean, honestly.
I mean, could they, you could ask a number of questions here. Could they teach science in a science class? Would that be okay? Then if that's okay, then presumably the answer would be yes, hopefully. Yeah. People would answer yes. Yeah. Could you teach scientific evidence against naturalism?
Apparently not.
Apparently not.
I mean, I want to just imagine you're a student in the class. And so, they're talking about whatever, and they show you some amazing, thing like a bacterial flagellum motor, or they show you like an ATP synthase motor inside living cells, and you're a student, and you go, excuse me, sir, that looks designed. Nope, we can't talk about that. Nope. What do you mean you can't talk about that? Like, can you imagine a group of students asking different questions? Well, what about this? Oh, no, as soon as you talk about design, it's just not allowed. But anyway,
you censor out various conclusions.
Right.
So here's this, and here's this, and you're not allowed to ever suggest that perhaps naturalism can't come up with this stuff. So it had to be designed. Oh, but you're not allowed to talk about that now, apparently in Indiana here. So.
Yeah, it's continuing in the news report. The school had been in the headlines since the Freedom from Religion Foundation, which wants to eradicate references to faith in the public sphere and on university campuses, demanded an investigation into whether Ball State physicist Dr. Eric Hedden had informed his students about the theory of intelligent design.
That's amazing. Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Right.
It's nice how they always take their religion out of what they're attacking. Freedom from religion. Well, that would mean
freedom from
the university would be empty of people. Well, seriously, because everyone is equally religious. Everyone has a certain set of beliefs. They believe about themselves, about morality, about where the universe, where they came from, and so on.
Yeah, so atheism is a religion.
Of course.
Humanism is a religion.
You'd have to take the freedom from religion, folks. They
would have to shoot themselves and get rid of themselves in order for not to.
Nobody'd be at the university. It'd be empty classes.
Yeah, so his interdisciplinary honors course, Boundaries of Science, included a partial bibliography listing books favorable to and others critical of intelligent design, and that was considered teaching religion. Folks, it's just getting to the point of silliness. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the show. We'll see you next time.